Becoming the author of your own life after narcissistic abuse. The child of a narcissistic parent is often that parent's prized possession. Think of a cooing, awe-inspired infant who just looks at the parent with need, gratitude, and wonder. Such explicit dependency and need can gratify the narcissistic parent because they're being depended upon and get to be in the center of their child's life. It's a bit of a psychologically merged state at this kind of initial, somewhat mutually euphoric stage of an infant-parent's relationship. Now, I'm not trying to ignore the hardships that can also come at this stage of the infant's life in terms of getting up to feed the child when they wake up in the middle of the night and so forth. But this overarching sense of the infant's adulation of the parent can, for a narcissistically organized parent, be gratifying in these ways nonetheless. But as the child grows chronologically, new developmental needs emerge that aren't just focused on their parent. These needs fall under two categories, namely seeking and wanting more independence and to be supported in doing so, and seeking relationships and happiness in those relationships beyond just their parents and immediate family. For example, a young child, a toddler, gets to take their first steps and see that they can stand for just a little bit longer each time they try to, and then begin to walk and feel the thrill of getting to explore more of their world, is naturally, drawn towards such growth. And in terms of that second need of wanting to have more relationships than just with their primary caregiver, the child may find interesting the other parent or older sibling and really want to be close to them, even in lieu of the parent before, even more so than their parent. They may begin to attend preschool and really like certain classmates and want to spend time with them. The problem for the child of a narcissistic parent is that these normal and very healthy developmental strivings to expand one's own ability to explore the world and the bigness of the world that they have to explore in terms of relationships beyond just the family can all feel like a betrayal to the narcissistic parent. And since a narcissistic person and parent believes that their needs are more important than others, then they're very prone to see their child's developmental healthy strivings as selfish because they are putting themselves above the person who's supposedly most important in the relationship, and that is the parent. Put in a different way, the narcissistic parent feels entitled for their child to comply with their sense of themselves as having an elevated importance. So when their child initially seeks happiness beyond them and tries to sort of do on their own for themselves, then they're not going along with that parent's entitled expectation to be and stay in the center of that child's life. The parent can respond by growing vindictively punitive towards the child, often along some trumped up charges that don't really have a whole lot of evidence, yet become in essence excuses to unleash the fury at the child's supposed betrayal. The effect is the child learns that when they do these very healthy things for themselves, their relationship to their parent is jeopardized. The parent might also coldly withdraw from the child when the child tries to expand their world in these ways, and thereby sending that same message that to live from the center of their own needs invites the parent's abandonment. The narcissistic parent is in essence demanding that the child return to that earlier merged state with them, where it's the parent who is most important to the child and the child's life revolves around that parent. Now the child's in an unwinnable predicament. They can either continue to expand their world and their capacities, but face their parents' narcissistic parents' punishments and or withdrawal and suffer all the emotional pain that brings the child, or the child can abandon their own needs to be independent and to have a bigger life than beyond the parent and to be in possession of themselves, to return to that more merged state with the parent, which affords the child the security of knowing their relationship with the only parent they have is intact. It's really no choice. The child has to do the second alternative and do whatever it takes to preserve the relationship with the narcissistic parent along that parent's terms. So this leads to the child learning they have to involve the parent in everything that they think, feel, and do. And this can happen in subtle and not so subtle ways. Like the child may work really hard to get good grades in school, but mostly for the experience of showing those grades to their parent so that the parent has the sense that the child was thinking of them the whole time that they were working hard to get these good grades in school, and for the parent to know that it's the parent's approval of the child's accomplishments that matters most to that child. So in essence, the child can learn that they must report all good news in their life to the parent because only then does it really count. And as survivors of such narcissistic abuse in childhood begin to sort of recover it, particularly in adulthood, this demand to sort of stay merged with the parent can take sort of new forms. One of those ways is by thinking of your strengths, say as the ability to be empathetic with people in your life today as byproducts of what you had to endure with your narcissistic parent. So yeah, it's important to understand how as a child of a narcissistic parent, you may have felt coerced to be empathic towards that parent, in essence, whether you wanted to or not. But also seeing your current abilities to be empathetic today as a result of having to deal with your narcissistic parent back then can reflect a way of also having to involve that parent in your own definition of yourself today. And relatedly, adult survivors may feel it necessary to relate sort of everything they experience or think about in their lives today back to childhood. You know, some of that again is a very, I think, useful way of making sense of what happened, but it can again also serve this function of kind of keeping the parent involved in all that you do, think, or feel, because in adherence to that old mandate that the parent had for you. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to build awareness of the ways you may still be incorporating your narcissistic parent in your life today, and how this can come at the expense of having full possession of yourself. And I'll describe the process of emerging from the merged state with the narcissistic parent in order to resume pursuit of those earlier goals that had to be abandoned. And that is knowing it's safe to pursue your independence in life and resuming pursuit of relationships outside of your narcissistic parent so that you get to have multiple sources of happiness in your life today. Well, my name is Jay Reed, and I'm a licensed psychotherapist in California, and I work with adult scapegoat survivors of narcissistic parents. Over the years, I've heard and grown to understand some common patterns that emerge in the lives of such individuals. They often are the first to assume blame for any problems that arise, even those that aren't their fault, invisible to others, and unsure how to stop living by the rules that they were raised under. Well, I started this channel to offer a clear and respectful place to name those experiences and hopefully demonstrate that recovery isn't about fixing yourself, but about understanding what happened to you and building new experiences in new relationships where you get to learn and live under new rules. And in my professional and personal experience as a scapegoat survivor myself, I found that there are 3 principles that best help survivors do this. And these principles I call the 3 pillars of recovery. Pillar number 1 is to make sense of what happened so that you know it wasn't your fault. Pillar number 2 is to gain distance from narcissistic abusers today and closeness to safe people. And pillar number 3 is to live in defiance of the narcissist rules. I've both seen and experienced large improvements in quality of life after applying these principles. And if you're looking for a free resource on what you can do today to help yourself recover from this form of abuse, then I recommend you check out my free ebook called 4 Ways Adult Scapegoat Survivors Can Heal. And you can find the link in the description box below or by clicking here. So what life looks and feels like when you have to stay involved with your narcissistic parent? Well, when this is the case, it can very much feel like having to live with an invisible leash on. You know, just like you might think of walking your dog on a leash. That's the same sense of constriction that can apply for the survivor of this type of a narcissistic parent. And when there are moments of freedom, say at the end of a workday, when all your tasks are done, or on the weekends, that cannot feel very safe. In fact, it can feel more uncomfortable to have unstructured time than to have time that's filled up with things that you sort of have to do or obligations. The latter is much more familiar and it's easier to orient to than this sort of free time or freedom, because that's what used to spell danger for the child of a narcissistic parent. Another way that one can stay involved with their narcissistic parent is that everything you sort of think and feel gets referred back to that parent. So even efforts to disprove to the parent that you are not who they treated you to be can serve the function of keeping or staying involved in their ideas about you. Another feature of this sort of involvement with a narcissistic parent, again, when I say narcissistic parent, I more mean the internalized kind of sense of that parent, how they live in your mind and in your sort of psychological fantasies, as it was. So that other way is that current matters can seem less relevant than what happened in the past. It can feel like there's something to solve about the abuse that happened in the past, and that the present won't feel worthwhile to be fully involved in until that solution is reached. But the pursuit of that solution inevitably kind of keeps you more interfacing with that narcissistic parent. Well, how does this change? It's essential to find a new relationship that's focused on understanding your experience. This is because it's imperative to grow to believe that this time, if you turn towards your independence and broadening the sources of happiness in your life, this person you need won't punish you nor leave. And it may very well not seem that way at first. Trying to be independent or have a bigger life may still feel dangerous like it was, but having this sort of new relationship in place can make it progressively easier and more trustworthy to try to do this. And as I always tend to mention in these videos, I think what I'm particularly referring to is the therapeutic relationship as such a new form of relationship, because it is more skewed towards understanding your experiences, where a friendship or relationship is much more reciprocal. By virtue of it being more skewed towards understanding you and being about you, it counters having to be wholly absorbed into your parent's life for a relationship to stay intact. And it's a reliable bet that this person will remain connected to you even as you sort of break these rules of staying wholly involved with your narcissistic parent. That is, as you turn towards your independence and building bigger relationships, even sort of outside the therapeutic relationship, that won't diminish this person's willingness to stay connected to you and interested in your life. So I sort of think of there being three phases to the process of change from having to be overly involved in your narcissistic parent's mind. The first phase is saying what needs to be said. Although I alluded earlier to talking about how things today are related to how you were treated by your narcissistic parent, I didn't mean to imply that that isn't a needed phase to experience. That after going through this type of coercion, it's very important to talk about it in a new relationship where that gets to be witnessed and you get to sort of know for yourself that it was in essence unfair to you and really shouldn't have happened. I don't know if there's a way to, recover that sense that, hey, this wasn't okay without talking about what it was like. In essence, this phase helps you build a sense of awareness of your own offense at how your parent treated you. And that sense of taking appropriate offense is integral to eventually being able to turn away from that parent and towards yourself and your own needs. Phase two is paying more attention to yourself today. Once phase one has sort of run its course, survivors of such abuse may begin talking more about what's going on in their lives today. This can be difficult at first because, it can feel like what's happening in life today is far less important than what happened in life back then. The adult survivor may feel like they're leaving something behind, sort of in the past. The survivor may feel like they're leaving something undone in the past and may fear that that'll interfere with their healing today. But if that fear can be tolerated and the survivor can stick with focusing on and talking about what's going on in their own life today, then there can be even more progression in sort of disinvolving yourself with your narcissistic parent and more involving yourself more in your own life and your own relationships today. And phase 3 is owning your life without catastrophic loss. So eventually, adult survivors of this kind of a childhood get to prioritize and wholly engage in what's important to them in their lives today. And as they turn towards themselves and what they can do kind of as an independent adult, along with cultivating and taking pleasure in the relationships and friendships they have in their life, they don't experience the loss of this, in this case, I'll use the example of therapists, their therapist attunement to them, again, curiosity and interest in their lives. This is such an important corrective experience because it counters the trauma from before, and that is that they lose the person they need most when they turn towards themselves. Now the survivor gets to both, you could say, have their cake and eat it too, turn towards themselves and have the person they need most, or it's sort of a stand-in, you could say, stay right there with them. Well, if this is kind of resonating with you, then I'd invite you to think about one way you may involve your narcissistic parent in your life today. Again, it doesn't have to be like the actual parent. It can be kind of in your own mind or your mind's eye. How you involve that parent in your life that takes up more internal real estate than you'd like. And I'd encourage you to put your answers to that question in the comments section below so that we can kind of build an inventory of how this phenomenon happens in the lives of survivors of this form of abuse in childhood. I think seeing perhaps your own experience reflected in the other comments can really help in feeling less alone in this particular type of experience for survivors of narcissistic parents. Well, I want to offer an anonymized case example to just sort of illustrate how this sense of involvement with a narcissistic parent develops and how it gets to be sort of undone or resolved through the participation in therapy, and thereby getting to become, again, the author of your own life. Well, Tom came to treatment in his mid-20s because he was riddled with anxiety and felt like his life wasn't his. He explained that when he was really young, he felt like he had a really good relationship with his father, but that once he turned about 12, he couldn't do anything right in the eyes of this man. In the first couple years of his therapy, Tom would recount all the ways that his father would devalue, deprive, and domineer him. His therapist compassionately and patiently listened and validated Tom's experience throughout these very distressing memories he was reporting. And in the third year of treatment, Tom spontaneously and organically brought up how he was working towards a promotion at his job. Some of his efforts he saw as a way to disprove his father's claims that he was immature and incapable. But as we talked about a little more, another part of him just wanted to get this promotion for himself. This allowed us to talk about how Tom would often operate as though he had to involve his father in his thinking and feelings at all times. And in so doing, it brought to light in Tom's mind what would happen in his upbringing if he were to live his own life. He began to recall hoping that his father might show interest in a fun time he'd had with his friends, only to feel totally dismissed in such times. He also recalled feeling tremendous guilt because of how his father would portray Tom's desires to go spend time with his friends as a betrayal of his father and of his family. Saying things to Tom like, you care more about seeing your friends than you do spending time with the people who love you the most, his family, supposedly. And in the course of doing all this, Tom and his therapist were finding Tom's own experience in his past, not just the lens of his past that was sort of merged with the mind of his father. And by the fourth year of therapy, Tom spent most of the time in sessions addressing what was most important to him in his life today, with relatively little mention of his father. We could say that Tom's mind and body had learned and grown to trust that he could turn towards his own life today, and his therapist would remain interested in him and happy that he was finding happiness of his own in his life. A stark contrast to what he met from his father earlier in life. Well, I think that having to involve your parent in every aspect of your life, even in a psychological sense, is part of being under what I've called the scapegoat spell. And this spell can feel like a trance where you have to stay focused on your narcissistic parent to the exclusion of everything else that's important to you in your life today. And that's a big reason why I created the Breaking the Scapegoat Spell live online group class. In it, I teach participants specific mind-body tools to notice, interrupt, and redirect the energies that have gone towards maintaining adherence to the scapegoat spell. The class lasts 8 weeks and is limited to 10 participants to ensure a very close-knit and cohesive group experience. You'll get chances to apply the concepts and tools that are taught in the class in exercises in your own experience, then get together with your partner to discuss what you've learned about, and in essence make it more real by sharing what you've kind of learned with someone else. So it's not just a sort of an abstract conceptual exercise on your own. You actually get to say and live out these new realizations you're making in the work with your partner. And I should say that you get paired with the same partner throughout the 8 weeks so that a real sense of familiarity and trust gets to be built. All of this lets you turn your attention from the past to yourself and your current life today, while having a connection to the group and to your partner in ways that support you in that effort. And if you're interested, you can find more information by clicking on the link in the description box below or by clicking here. And a few classes have already been completed, and that's allowed me to get some feedback about what's been useful to participants about the course. And you can see some of that feedback on the page that the link goes to. So I encourage you to check that out. Well, with that, I want to thank you for tuning in today. And I hope that if you found yourself kind of struggling with having to keep your narcissistic parent in the center of your life today, that what was talked about today can offer perhaps an illumination of the path away from that and back towards yourself and your own life. And I want to thank everyone for your support of this channel and the resources around it. Again, it's just so awesome to see everyone's encouragement of each other and validation in the comments section of these videos. And lastly, if you'd like to learn how a narcissistic parent might block their child from exploring and owning their life, then you might check out this video. And with that, I look forward to posting again next Friday. Take care.